The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and dreamed of what might be out there. They built rockets and space stations. They walked on the moon and sent machines to Mars. And finally, in the year 2247, they built ships that could travel between the stars. Captain James Morrison stood on the bridge of the Unity, humanity's first interstellar vessel. His crew of 47 men and women had traveled for 3 years to reach this moment. Before them hung a massive space station, bigger than anything humans had ever built. It was shaped like a flower with 1,000 petals, each petal a different color that shifted and changed in the starlight. "We're receiving a transmission," said Communications Officer Lynn Park. Her voice shook with excitement. "Captain, they're speaking to us. The translation software is working." The message played through the bridge speakers. The voice was cold and flat, without any emotion at all. "Unknown vessel. You have entered Concord space. Identify yourself and your species of origin. Failure to comply will result in immediate destruction." Morrison took a deep breath. This was the moment humanity had waited for. First contact with alien life. He had practiced his speech 100 times. "This is Captain James Morrison of the Earth vessel Unity. We represent the human race from the planet Earth. We come in peace, seeking friendship and knowledge. We are honored to meet you." There was a long silence. Then the voice returned. "Human race. Earth. No records found. Stand by for inspection." Within an hour, the Unity was surrounded by sleek alien ships. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Each one moved with a grace that made human vessels look like clumsy children's toys. A beam of light pulled the Unity toward the station, and Morrison realized they had no choice but to go along with it. The inspection lasted 3 days. Aliens of different species came aboard and examined everything. They scanned the humans with strange devices. They looked at the ship's engines and weapons and computers. They asked questions in that same flat, emotionless voice. And through it all, Morrison noticed something that worried him deeply. They were not impressed. Not even a little bit. The aliens looked at human technology the way a grown adult might look at a child's drawing. They smiled politely, but their eyes held nothing but boredom. One of them, a tall creature with silver skin and 4 arms, actually laughed when he saw the Unity's weapon systems. "Plasma cannons," the alien said to his companion. "How quaint. I believe we stopped using these about 60,000 years ago." On the 4th day, Morrison and his senior officers were brought before the Galactic Concord Assembly. The chamber was vast beyond imagination. Thousands of seats rose up in circles around a central platform, and each seat held a representative of a different alien species. Morrison counted at least 50 different types of beings, though he learned later that only 12 species actually mattered. These were the elder species, the ones who had ruled the galaxy for over 100,000 years. A creature that looked like a giant insect spoke first. Its mandibles clicked together as it made sounds that the translator turned into words. "The Council recognizes the arrival of a new species. Designation: Human. Planet of origin: Earth. Assessment team, present your findings." The silver-skinned alien who had laughed at their weapons stood up. His name, Morrison learned, was Ambassador Verath, of the Kilorian people. "The humans are a Class 7 civilization," Verath announced. "Pre-developmental stage. They have achieved basic interstellar travel using primitive fusion drives. Their weapons are approximately 60,000 years behind current standards. Their biology is fragile, with an average lifespan of only 80 to 100 years. They show no signs of psychic ability, genetic enhancement, or dimensional manipulation." He paused and looked directly at Morrison. There was no hatred in his eyes. That might have been easier to bear. Instead, there was only complete and utter indifference. In summary, the human race poses no threat, offers no valuable resources or knowledge, and has no strategic importance. I recommend granting them observer status, with a single ceremonial vote in the Assembly. This will satisfy diplomatic requirements without wasting the Council's time. Morrison felt his face grow hot. "With respect, Ambassador, we have come a very long way. Our people have worked for generations to reach the stars. We hoped to establish trade relationships, to share knowledge, to become partners in..." "Partners?" Another alien spoke up. This one was massive, with thick gray skin covered in bony plates. Its voice was deep and rumbling. You wish to be partners with the Concord? Little creature, do you understand what you are asking? Your entire species has existed for less time than I have been alive. Your technology is a toy. Your military strength is a joke. What could you possibly offer us? The chamber filled with a sound that Morrison realized was laughter. Dozens of alien species, all laughing at the very idea that humans might have something to contribute. We offer friendship, Morrison said, his voice barely steady. We offer our willingness to learn, to grow, to work alongside you. The laughter grew louder. The insect creature raised a limb for silence. The matter is decided. The human race is granted observer status. They will receive one vote in the assembly, as is customary for new species. This session is concluded, and just like that, humanity's grand entrance onto the galactic stage was over. They were given a small office in the lowest level of the station and told to submit any requests through proper channels. The proper channels, they soon discovered, led nowhere at all. Over the next 14 years, humanity tried everything. They sent their brightest scientists to share discoveries, but the aliens already knew everything humans had figured out, and much more besides. They offered art and music and literature, but the elder species found human creativity primitive and unrefined. They proposed trade deals, but they had nothing the galaxy wanted to buy. Ambassador Elena Vasquez replaced Morrison after he died of old age. She was determined to succeed where he had failed. She learned the languages and customs of a dozen species. She attended every assembly meeting, even though humans were rarely allowed to speak. She built relationships with lower-ranking officials, hoping to find allies. But the galaxy did not care about humanity. They were too weak, too primitive, too unimportant. Every request was denied. Every proposal was ignored. Humanity was like a small child trying to join a conversation between adults. They were tolerated, barely, and nothing more. The real crisis came in the year 2259, 12 years after first contact. Human colonies had spread to several nearby star systems. One of these colonies, a planet called New Horizon, was home to 2 million people. They had built cities and farms. Children had been born there who had never seen Earth. It was their home. Then the Vrethkai came. The Vrethkai were one of the elder species. They looked like giant insects, similar to praying mantises but standing 3 meters tall. They were not cruel by nature, but they were utterly practical. When they decided they wanted the planet that humans called New Horizon, they simply took it. This world has been designated as Vrethkai territory, their announcement stated. All non-Vrethkai life forms must evacuate within 30 standard days. Failure to comply will result in removal by force. Ambassador Vasquez rushed to the assembly. She begged for help. She cited laws and treaties. She appealed to basic decency and justice. The assembly's response was swift and final. The territory in question was not officially registered to the human species, the speaker announced. Under Concord law, unregistered territory may be claimed by any member species. The Vrethkai claim is valid. This matter is closed. But there are 2 million people there, Vasquez shouted. Families, children. You cannot simply throw them out of their homes. The humans have 30 days to evacuate, the speaker repeated. This matter is closed. The humans of New Horizon had nowhere to go. Earth could not support another 2 million people. The other colonies were too small. In the end, the Vrethkai generously extended the deadline to 60 days, and the humans were forced to crowd onto transport ships with only what they could carry. 300 people died during the evacuation. Dozens more took their own lives rather than leave the only home they had ever known. And the galaxy did not care. Vasquez spent the next 2 years filing complaints and appeals. Every single one was denied. The message was always the same. Humans were not important enough to protect. Their suffering did not matter. They should be grateful they were allowed to exist at all. During this time, Vasquez noticed something that frightened her. The way certain species looked at humanity was changing. Before, they had been indifferent. Now, some of them seemed almost annoyed. The Drathos were the worst. They were one of the most powerful elder species, a race of tall, pale beings with sharp features and eyes like black holes. Their empire stretched across 1,000 star systems, and their military was legendary. They had conquered dozens of species over the millennia, and they viewed warfare as an art form. General Kethvor of the Drathos High Command made no secret of his opinion about humans. He spoke about them often in public forums, and his words were carried across the galaxy. "The humans breed like vermin," he said in one famous speech. "They spread to new worlds with no regard for proper territorial law. They constantly petition the assembly with their pathetic complaints. They are a nuisance, nothing more. But nuisances, if left unchecked, can become problems. And I do not tolerate problems." Vasquez heard these words and felt ice in her blood. She tried to warn Earth's government, but they did not want to believe her. "Surely," they said, "the Concord would not allow one species to attack another without reason. Surely there were rules against such things. There were rules. But rules only protect those with the power to enforce them. And humanity had no power at all." The last assembly meeting that Vasquez attended was on a cold day in March of 2261. She had come to present yet another appeal, this time asking for terraforming technology to help a dying colony world. The request was denied before she even finished speaking. As she stood to leave, something made her stop. Perhaps it was intuition. Perhaps it was the way the Drathos representatives were smiling. Whatever it was, she felt compelled to speak. "I want to say something," she announced. Her voice was calm and clear. "I know you will not listen. I know you do not care. But I want these words recorded in the official archives, so that someday, someone will know the truth." The chamber fell silent, not out of respect, but out of curiosity. What would the little human say? "My people came to you with open hands," Vasquez continued. "We came seeking friendship and knowledge. We asked for nothing but a chance to prove ourselves, to grow, to become part of something greater. And you rejected us. You ignored us. You treated us as less than nothing." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many aliens as she could. "We asked for help when our people were thrown from their homes. You refused. We asked for technology to save dying colonies. You refused. We asked, again and again, for the basic decency that any species should show another, and you laughed at us." The Drathos general was still smiling. Vasquez looked directly at him. "I know what you are planning," she said. "I know you see us as vermin to be exterminated, and I know that no one in this chamber will lift a finger to stop you. We are alone. We have always been alone." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was harder than steel. "But I want you to remember this day. All of you. I want you to remember that we asked for peace. We begged for peace, and when you refused, when you decided that our lives meant nothing, you created something. You do not know what it is yet. You cannot see it. But it is there, growing in the hearts of every human being. Rage, desperation, the absolute certainty that we have nothing left to lose." She turned to leave, then stopped one final time. "You think you know what humans are capable of. You have measured our ships and our weapons and found them wanting. But you have not measured our will. You have not measured our hatred, and you have not measured our memory. We never forget. Never." The chamber erupted in laughter again. The Drathos general applauded mockingly. Ambassador Verath of the Kilorians shook his head with amusement. "How dramatic," someone said. "Perhaps humans have a future in entertainment after all." Vasquez walked out of the chamber with her head held high. She knew that her words had meant nothing to them. They were too arrogant, too sure of their own power, to take her seriously. But she had not spoken for them. She had spoken for the record. She had spoken so that someday, when everything changed, there would be proof that humanity had tried, that they had asked for peace, and that they had been refused. 3 months later, the Drathos fleet appeared in Earth's sky. 700 warships, each one larger than any vessel humanity had ever built. They came without warning, without declaration of war, without any pretense of justice. General Kethvor broadcast a single message to the planet below. "The Drathos High Command has determined that the human species poses a potential future threat to galactic stability. In accordance with standard population control protocols, the human homeworld and all associated territories will be sterilized. This action is taken for the good of the galaxy. Resistance is unnecessary. This will be quick." The ships opened fire. Elena Vasquez was in her office when the first bombs fell. She had just enough time to look up at the sky, to see the brilliant flash of light that would be the last thing she ever saw. Her final thought was of her words in the assembly. "You will remember this day." And somewhere, scattered across the cold darkness of space, the survivors of humanity heard the news. They watched their homeworld burn. They saw the death toll climb into the billions. They felt something break inside them, and something else take its place. Something cold, something patient, something that would never, ever forget. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. They had taken a species that only wanted peace and taught them that peace was impossible. They had taken a species with nothing to offer and given them a purpose, revenge. But that would come later. For now, there was only silence. The silence of 11 billion graves. The silence of a species that had been pushed beyond the breaking point. And in that silence, something new was being born. Something that would one day shake the very foundations of the galaxy. The elder species did not notice. They had already forgotten about humanity. That was their second mistake. The sky above Earth had turned the color of blood. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen stood at the window of the orbital station Prometheus, watching the Drathos fleet fill the darkness between Earth and its moon. 700 ships. Each one was a mountain of metal and death, bristling with weapons that made human technology look like children's toys. They moved in perfect formation, like predators circling wounded prey. "All stations report ready," came a voice behind her. It was Admiral Marcus Webb, the highest-ranking officer in Earth's defense fleet. His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly as he gripped the railing. 43 ships. That's everything we have. Sarah did not turn around. She kept watching the Drathos fleet. 43 against 700. "We have to try," Webb said. "We have to give them something to remember." The first shots were fired at exactly 14:32 Earth Standard Time on June 17, 2261. Humanity's 43 ships charged forward in a desperate attack. They knew they could not win. They knew they would all die. But they refused to simply wait for death to come to them. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Sarah watched from the Prometheus as ship after ship exploded. The Drathos weapons cut through human shields like they were made of paper. Plasma cannons, railguns, nuclear missiles, nothing worked. The enemy fleet did not even slow down. They swatted humanity's defense force aside like insects and continued toward Earth. Admiral Webb's flagship, the Defender, was the last to fall. His final transmission was broadcast across all frequencies so that everyone could hear. "This is Admiral Webb to all human vessels and stations. We have failed to stop them. May God have mercy on us all. To those who survive, remember us. Remember what they did, and make them pay." Then his ship vanished in a ball of fire, and humanity's entire military was gone. The Drathos did not pause to celebrate. They did not send demands or ultimatums. They simply began their work. The first bombs fell on the great cities of Earth: New York, Beijing, London, Moscow, Mumbai. One by one, the places where humans had lived and loved and dreamed for thousands of years were turned to ash and glass. The bombs were not nuclear weapons, they were something far worse. They burned so hot that buildings melted in an instant. They burned so deep that underground shelters offered no protection. They burned and burned until there was nothing left but scorched stone. Sarah could not look away. She watched her homeworld die, and something inside her died with it. "We need to go," said a voice beside her. It was Engineer First Class Tom Rivera, one of her oldest friends. His face was wet with tears, but his voice was firm. "Sarah, we need to go now. The station will be next." She shook her head. "Where would we go?" "The emergency shuttles. There's a rally point at Titan Station. Some ships are getting away. We can." A massive explosion rocked the station. Alarms screamed. Red lights flashed everywhere. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 12. Someone shouted. "They're targeting the orbital platforms." Sarah finally moved. She grabbed Tom's arm and ran. The next few hours were a blur of chaos and terror. Sarah and a handful of survivors fought their way to the shuttle bay. They launched into space just as the Prometheus broke apart behind them. All around them, other stations were dying. The great orbital ring that humanity had spent 2 centuries building was being torn apart piece by piece. And below them, Earth continued to burn. Sarah piloted the shuttle away from the planet, weaving between debris and weapons fire. She did not know where she was going. She only knew that she had to survive. Someone had to survive to remember this. As they fled, she caught one last glimpse of Earth through the shuttle's rear camera, the planet that had given birth to humanity, that had nurtured their species for millions of years, was almost unrecognizable. Continents that had been green and blue were now black and orange. Oceans were boiling away. The atmosphere itself was on fire. 11 billion people. Gone in less than 72 hours. Tom sat beside her in the co-pilot seat. He was staring at the same image. My family was in Sao Paulo, he said quietly. My wife, my 2 daughters. They were supposed to come up to the station next month. Sarah had no words. Her own parents had lived in Tokyo. Her brother had been stationed in New York. Everyone she had ever known, everyone she had ever loved, was now ash blowing in a radioactive wind. They traveled for 3 days before they found other survivors. A small fleet of civilian transport ships had gathered near Jupiter, hiding in the shadow of one of its moons. There were perhaps 5,000 people in total, scientists, engineers, miners who had been working in the outer system when the attack came, and there was Admiral Chen Wei-lin. Admiral Chen was not related to Sarah, despite sharing her last name. He was an old man, nearly 80 years old, who had spent most of his career commanding patrol ships in the outer system. He had never expected to be important. He had never expected to lead anything more than a few dozen crew members. Now he found himself in command of what remained of the human race. We've been gathering reports from across the system, he told the assembled survivors in the cargo hold of the largest transport ship. His voice was hoarse from grief, but his eyes were clear. Mars colonies destroyed. Venus stations destroyed. The asteroid belt settlements destroyed. Luna destroyed. He paused to let the words sink in. Our best estimate is that approximately 200 million humans survived the attack. Most are scattered in small groups across the outer system. Some are on generation ships that were between star systems when the attack happened. A few colony worlds that had not yet been officially registered may have been missed. What about the Concorde? Someone shouted. What did they do to stop this? Chen's face hardened. They did nothing. The Drathos acted without Concorde approval, but no other species lifted a finger to help us. The official Concorde statement called it a regrettable but necessary population correction of a pre-developmental species. They said no further action was required. The crowd erupted in anger. People shouted and cursed and wept. Sarah sat silently, feeling a cold numbness spread through her chest. Population correction. That was what they called the murder of 11 billion people. Like they were removing weeds from a garden. Chen raised his hand for silence. It took several minutes for the crowd to quiet down. I know you want revenge, he said. I want it too. I want to burn every Drathos world until there is nothing left but cinders. I want to make them suffer the way we have suffered. His voice dropped lower. But we cannot. Not yet. Not for a very long time. We are 200 million people with no homeworld, no military, and no allies. The Drathos alone have 10 trillion citizens and a fleet of hundreds of thousands of warships. If we try to fight now, we will be wiped out completely. Then what do? Tom asked. Just run away? Hide? Chen nodded slowly. Yes, that is exactly what we do. We run, we hide, we survive. Because survival is the only victory we can achieve right now. He looked around at the tired, broken faces of his people. The Drathos believe we are extinct. The Concorde believes we are extinct. Let them believe it. Let them forget about us, the way they have always forgotten about us. And while they forget, we will grow. We will learn. We will build. His voice grew stronger. I do not know how long it will take. Decades, centuries, perhaps longer. But one day, we will return. And on that day, they will learn what it means to face a species with nothing left to lose. On that day, they will learn what humans are truly capable of. Sarah felt something stir in her chest. It was not hope, not exactly. It was something darker and colder. It was the knowledge that she had a purpose now. Her life was no longer about happiness or success or love. Her life was about one thing and one thing only, making them pay. Over the next few months, the survivors organized themselves. They gathered every ship they could find, transports, mining vessels, research stations, anything that could travel between stars. They collected supplies and equipment and, most importantly, people. Every human who had survived the purge was precious beyond measure. Then they began the long retreat. Admiral Chen led the refugee fleet toward the galactic rim, the empty space at the edge of the galaxy where no elder species had any interest in going. The journey took years. Many ships broke down along the way. Many people died from illness or accidents or despair. Sarah Chen rose through the ranks during this time. She proved herself a capable leader. someone who could make hard decisions without flinching. When Admiral Chen needed someone to scout ahead for habitable worlds, she volunteered. When there was a dispute between ship captains, she mediated. When people lost hope and wanted to give up, she reminded them of what they were fighting for. The face of Earth, burning. That was what she saw every time she closed her eyes. That was what kept her going. Finally, after nearly 5 years of travel, they found a place to hide. It was a dead star system, a brown dwarf surrounded by frozen rocks, too cold and dark for any species to want, but it would serve their purposes. "This is where we begin again," Admiral Chen announced as the fleet settled into orbit around the largest rock. "This is our new home, not because it is beautiful or comfortable, but because no one will look for us here. We will call it Haven, and we will build it into something that will make our enemies tremble." Sarah stood beside him on the bridge of the command ship. She was 32 years old now, and she had not smiled since the day Earth died. "How long?" she asked. "How long until we're ready?" Chen looked at her with eyes that held both sorrow and determination. "I do not know. I will probably not live to see it. You might not either. But our children will. Or their children. Or theirs. It does not matter how long it takes, Lieutenant Commander. What matters is that we never forget. What matters is that we never forgive. What matters is that one day, no matter how distant, humanity returns." He placed his hand on her shoulder. "Promise me, Sarah. Promise me that you will carry this forward. That you will teach the next generation, and they will teach the next. That the memory of Earth, the memory of 11 billion murdered souls, will never fade." Sarah Chen looked out at the cold darkness of their new home. In that moment, she made a vow that would echo through the centuries. "I promise," she said. "We will remember. And when the time comes, we will make them remember too." The galaxy had made a terrible mistake when they burned Earth. They thought they were eliminating a nuisance. They thought they were preventing a potential future threat. They thought that by killing 11 billion people, they were making themselves safer. They were wrong. What they had done was create something far more dangerous than they could imagine. They had taken a species known for its creativity and adaptability and given it a single, burning purpose. They had united 200 million survivors in a hatred so deep and pure that it would never fade. The Drathos thought they had won. The Concord thought the human problem had been solved. They went back to their ancient games of politics and trade, secure in their power, confident in their superiority. They never noticed the refugee fleet disappearing into the darkness at the edge of the galaxy. They never wondered what those survivors might be doing out there in the void, and that was their greatest mistake of all. Because in the cold and the dark, humanity was not dying. Humanity was preparing. Every death was being recorded. Every name was being remembered. Every wrong was being catalogued for the day when payment would come due. The Purge of Saul was meant to be the end of humanity's story. Instead, it was only the beginning. Sarah Chen stood at the window of Haven's first permanent structure, watching construction drones begin their work. Behind her, engineers argued about power systems and defensive grids. Somewhere, children were being taught the names of cities that no longer existed on a planet that was now a tomb. She touched the small piece of rock that hung around her neck, a fragment of Earth, retrieved from the ruins by a salvage team that had risked everything to bring back this tiny reminder of home. "We're coming back," she whispered to the darkness. "Not today. Not tomorrow. But someday. And when we do, you will understand what you have done. You will understand what you have created. And you will be afraid." The stars did not answer. They never did. But they would. One day, they would. 300 years is a long time to wait for revenge. In the first decade after the Purge, the survivors simply tried to stay alive. Haven was a frozen wasteland of rock and ice, orbiting a dying star that gave almost no heat or light. The first winter killed thousands. Disease took thousands more. Suicide claimed many who simply could not bear the weight of what they had lost. But humanity refused to die. They dug deep into the frozen rocks and built cities underground. They created artificial suns using fusion reactors salvaged from their ships. They grew food in hydroponic farms and recycled every drop of water until it was precious as gold. Life was hard and painful, but it was life. Admiral Chen Weilin did not live to see the end of that first decade. He died peacefully in his sleep, at the age of 91, having spent his final years building the foundation of humanity's survival. His last words were spoken to Sarah Chen, who had become his most trusted officer. "Remember what I told you," he whispered. "Never forget, never forgive, and make them pay." Sarah held his hand as he passed. She was 43 years old, and she felt ancient. The next day, she was elected to lead the Council of Haven, the governing body that would guide humanity through the long years ahead. It was not a position she wanted, but it was a duty she could not refuse. Someone had to carry the torch. Someone had to keep the flame of vengeance burning. Her first act as council leader was to establish the memorial. It was a massive chamber carved into the heart of Haven's largest asteroid, and its walls were covered with names. 11 billion names, one for every human who had died in the purge. It took teams of workers decades to engrave them all, but it was done. No one would ever be forgotten. "This is why we endure," Sarah told the people at the memorial's dedication ceremony. "This is why we suffer in this cold darkness. Not for ourselves, but for them. Every name on these walls is crying out for justice, and one day, we will answer them." The children born on Haven grew up with the memorial as their church. They learned to read by studying the names of the dead. They learned mathematics by calculating how many years it would be until humanity was strong enough to return. They learned hatred before they learned love. Some of the older survivors worried about this. They wondered if it was healthy to raise children on a diet of grief and anger. But most understood that it was necessary. The memory of the purge had to be kept alive, or humanity would lose its purpose. 30 years after the purge, something remarkable happened. A young scientist named Yuki Tanaka made a breakthrough that would change everything. She had been studying the genetic modifications used by the elder species to extend their lifespans. The Concord races lived for thousands of years, sometimes tens of thousands. This was one of the reasons they viewed humans as inferior to them. A species that died after a mere century was barely more than animals. Yuki refused to accept this limitation. "If they can do it, so can we," she told her research team. "We just need to understand how." She spent 15 years studying stolen data and captured alien technology. She experimented on herself when no one else would volunteer. She nearly died 7 times from failed treatments. But she did not give up, and finally, she succeeded. The Tanaka Protocol, as it came to be known, rewrote human genetics at the most fundamental level. It extended the human lifespan to 500 years, perhaps longer. It enhanced cognitive ability, allowing humans to think faster and remember more. It strengthened the body and sharpened the senses, but it was not immortality. Yuki was careful about that. "We must not become like them," she warned the council. "The elder species have lived so long that they have forgotten what it means to value life. They kill billions without feeling anything because individual lives mean nothing to them. We must remain mortal. We must remember what it is to lose someone. That is what makes us human." Sarah Chen was one of the first to receive the Tanaka Protocol. At 73 years old, she felt her body grow young again. Her gray hair turned black. Her aching joints became strong. She looked in the mirror and saw a woman of 30 staring back at her. "I have been given more time," she said to her reflection. "More time to remember. More time to prepare. More time to hate." The next breakthrough came from an engineer named Marcus Stone. He had been studying the engines of captured alien scout ships, trying to understand how the elder species traveled so quickly between stars. Human fusion drives were slow and inefficient compared to what the Concord races used. Stone was not content to simply copy alien technology. He wanted to surpass it. "They have been using the same basic principles for 100,000 years, he told the engineering council. "They have improved their designs, but they have never truly innovated. They are too old, too set in their ways. We are young. We can think differently." He proposed something that Concord scientists had dismissed as impossible: folding space itself. The theory was simple in concept. Instead of traveling through space, why not bring your destination closer to you? Fold the fabric of reality so that 2 distant points touched, then step across. It would be instant travel, faster than any drive system ever built. The mathematics were impossibly complex. The energy requirements were astronomical. Every elder species had concluded it could not be done. Stone did it anyway. The first successful test of the Wrath Drive, so named because it would carry humanity's vengeance across the stars, took place 87 years after the purge. A small probe disappeared from Haven and reappeared 300 light-years away in the span of a heartbeat. Sarah Chen was there to see it. She was now 160 years old but looked no older than 40. She watched the data scroll across the screen and felt something she had not felt in nearly a century. Hope. How long until we can build ships with this technology? She asked. Stone smiled grimly. Give me 30 years. It took him 25. The third breakthrough was the most frightening. Dr. Helena Vance led a team that studied the genetic potential of human beings. She believed that the Tanaka Protocol was just the beginning. Humans could be so much more than they were: stronger, faster, smarter, deadlier. They could become weapons. The Ascended program began in secret. Volunteers were selected from the best soldiers and scientists, people who were willing to sacrifice their humanity for power. They underwent genetic reconstruction so extensive that they were barely recognizable as human when it was complete. The first Ascended soldier was named Victor Reyes. He had been a normal man once, a farmer from a Mars colony who had lost his entire family in the purge. Now he was something else entirely. His muscles could lift a ton. His bones were harder than steel. His reflexes were so fast that he could catch bullets in midair. His mind had been enhanced with computer implants that let him process tactical data in milliseconds. And his eyes glowed faintly in the dark, a side effect of the enhanced vision that let him see in any conditions. How do you feel? Dr. Vance asked him after the final procedure. Victor looked at his new hands. They were large and powerful, capable of crushing metal. I feel ready, he said. Ready to do what needs to be done. Over the next century, thousands more Ascended were created. They trained constantly, preparing for a war that had not yet come. They memorized the tactics and weaknesses of every elder species. They practiced killing in 1,000 different ways, and they waited. Meanwhile, the hidden fleet was growing. Deep in the asteroids of Haven, factories worked day and night building warships. Not the clumsy vessels that humanity had used before the purge. These were something entirely new. They were fast and deadly, equipped with wrath drives and weapons that the elder species had never imagined. The fleet began with a single ship, then 10, then 100, then 1,000. By the time 200 years had passed since the purge, the hidden fleet numbered over 10,000 vessels. Each one was worth a dozen conquered warships. Each one carried the names of the dead inscribed on its hull. Sarah Chen remained council leader throughout these long years. Some called her the Eternal Chairwoman. Others called her the Mother of Vengeance. She accepted both titles without comment. Her only concern was preparing humanity for the war to come. She spent much of her time in the memorial, walking among the endless walls of names. Sometimes she talked to the dead, telling them about the progress being made. Sometimes she simply stood in silence, remembering. The galaxy beyond Haven continued on without knowing humanity still existed. The elder species fought their petty wars and played their political games. The Drathos were more powerful than ever, having absorbed several weaker species into their empire. The Concord remained a corrupt and indifferent organization, concerned only with maintaining the power of those who already had it. Occasionally, humanity sent scouts to observe. They learned everything they could about their enemies. They mapped military installations and counted warships. They identified weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and they waited. The centuries passed. Generations were born and died. Though death came more slowly now thanks to the Tanaka Protocol, the children of Haven grew up hearing stories of Earth, a paradise lost that they had never seen. They studied images of blue oceans and green forests, unable to truly understand what had been taken from them. But they understood the hatred that was passed down perfectly from generation to generation. 300 years after the purge, Admiral Mei Chen stood before the Council of Haven. She was the great-great-great-granddaughter of Sarah Chen, who had finally died at the age of 412. Her duty complete. Sarah's last words had been the same as Admiral Weyland's so many centuries before. Never forget. Never forgive. Make them pay. Mei Chen had inherited her ancestors' fierce determination. She had also inherited command of the Hidden Fleet, which now numbered over 40,000 warships, 40,000 vessels of vengeance, crewed by humans who had never seen Earth but carried its memory in their blood. The time has come, she told the council. Our scouts report that the Drathos High Command is gathered on their homeworld for a military review. Their fleet is scattered across their empire, responding to border conflicts. They are vulnerable. The council members looked at each other. This was the moment they had been preparing for since before most of them were born. Are we ready? Someone asked. Mei Chen smiled. and there was no warmth in it. We have been ready for 300 years. The only question is whether the galaxy is ready for us. She activated a holographic display showing the full strength of the hidden fleet. 40,000 ships, each one a marvel of technology that surpassed anything the elder species possessed. Millions of crew members, including 50,000 ascended soldiers, weapons that could crack planets, shields that could withstand stars. Our ancestors fled into the darkness because they had no choice, Mei Chen said. They survived against impossible odds. They built this fleet with nothing but determination and hatred. And now, at last, we will deliver the justice that has been 300 years in coming. She looked at the faces of the council, seeing the same cold fire that burned in her own heart. The Drathos believe they are safe. The Concord believes we are extinct. They have forgotten about us. They have erased us from their histories. They think the human problem was solved 3 centuries ago. Her voice hardened into steel. They are about to learn otherwise. Today, we emerge from the shadows. Today, we remind the galaxy what they did to us. Today, we show them what humanity has become. She raised her fist in the salute that every human learned as a child, the sign of the unbroken spirit. The gesture that meant, we remember. For Earth, she said. For Earth, the council echoed. For the 11 billion. For the 11 billion. For vengeance. For vengeance. Mei Chen turned to face the stars, invisible beyond Haven's rocky walls but present in her mind's eye. The exile ends today, she said. Now they learn what they created. Now they learn that some things should never be forgotten. Now they learn that humanity does not forgive, does not surrender, and does not die. Throughout Haven, the message spread. Ships powered up their wrath drives. Soldiers checked their weapons. Families said goodbye to each other, knowing that some would not return, but there was no hesitation, no doubt. They had waited 300 years for this moment. The hidden fleet began to move, and somewhere in the heart of Concord space, completely unaware of what was coming, the Drathos High Command continued their military review. They discussed border skirmishes and trade disputes. They awarded medals to distinguished officers. They drank toasts to their eternal dominance. They had forgotten about the species they had tried to exterminate 3 centuries ago. They were about to remember. Commander Thexarn of the Drathos Imperial Guard was bored. He had been stationed at Outpost 17 for 30 years, watching the empty space at the edge of Drathos territory. Nothing ever happened here. No enemies, no traitors, no anything, just cold darkness and the endless hum of monitoring equipment. His species had destroyed the humans 300 years ago, and since then, this sector had been completely quiet. The outpost existed only because regulations demanded it. No one expected trouble. Thexarn was playing a game on his personal tablet when the alarms began screaming. He dropped the tablet and ran to the sensor station. His subordinates were already there, staring at the screens with expressions of total disbelief. "What is it?" Thexarn demanded. "What's happening?" "Sir." The sensor operator's voice was shaking. "Ships, thousands of them. They just appeared out of nowhere. No hyperspace signatures, no warning. They're just there." Thexarn looked at the screen and felt his blood turn to ice. The display showed more ships than he had ever seen in one place. They filled the sector like a swarm of angry insects, each one bristling with weapons. They were not like any vessels in the Drathos database. They were sleek and deadly, designed for one purpose: war. "Get me identification," he ordered. "Who are they? What species?" The operator ran the scan 3 times before answering. His face had gone pale. "Sir, the configuration matches historical records from 300 years ago. They're human ships. That's impossible. The humans are extinct. Sir, I'm reading life signs. Millions of them. And they're human. All of them." Before Thexarn could respond, a transmission came through. A human face appeared on every screen in the outpost. It was a woman with dark eyes and black hair, wearing a uniform that bore a symbol he did not recognize: a broken world surrounded by stars. "Attention, Drathos forces," the woman said. Her voice was calm and cold. "I am Admiral Mei Chen of the Terran Vengeance Fleet. 300 years ago, your species murdered 11 billion of my people. You burned our homeworld and tried to erase us from existence." She paused, and her eyes seemed to look directly into Thexarn's soul. "You failed." The screens flickered, and data began streaming across them. Images of the purge, video of Earth burning. The death toll, displayed in numbers so large they were almost impossible to comprehend. For 3 centuries, we have waited in the darkness, Admiral Chen continued. We have grown strong. We have built weapons you cannot imagine. And we have remembered every single name of every single person you murdered. Her voice hardened. Your time of judgment has come. We are not here to negotiate. We are not here to talk. We are here to show you what happens when you push a species beyond the breaking point. We are here to show you what humanity has become. The transmission ended. Thexarn tried to send a warning to High Command, but his communications were being jammed. He tried to power up the outpost's weapons, but they were already offline. Shut down by some kind of electronic attack he did not understand. Then the human ships opened fire. The battle for Outpost 17 lasted less than 2 minutes. When it was over, there was nothing left but debris and bodies. The same scene played out at 18 other Drathos outposts in the following hours. By the time the High Command learned what was happening, their entire outer defense network had been destroyed. General Kethvor the Younger was the grandson of the general who had ordered the purge of Earth. He had been raised on stories of that glorious victory, the day when Drathos might had crushed a rising threat before it could become dangerous. He had always considered it one of his grandfather's greatest achievements. Now he stood in the war room of the Imperial Palace, watching his empire crumble. How is this possible? He demanded. We destroyed them. We sterilized their entire star system. Some survived, General. His aide replied nervously. They must have been hiding somewhere beyond our territory, building their forces in secret. For 300 years? It would seem so, sir. Kethvor stared at the tactical display. The human fleet was cutting through Drathos space like a blade through soft flesh. Fortress worlds that had never been conquered were falling in hours. Battle fleets that had dominated the galaxy for millennia were being annihilated in minutes. Get me the Concorde, he ordered. We need reinforcements. Every species in the galaxy must unite against this threat. The message went out. The response came back within hours. The Concord Assembly has declined to intervene. The conflict between the Drathos Empire and the human survivors is considered an internal matter arising from historical events. No species has offered military assistance. Kethvor felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. The humans were not just winning, they were making a statement. Every world they conquered, they broadcast the same message. Names, millions of names, scrolling endlessly across every screen, the names of those who had died in the purge, and they kept coming. Admiral Mei Chen led the assault on the Drathos homeworld personally. Her flagship, the Remembrance, was the largest vessel in the fleet, a massive carrier that held 10,000 fighters and enough firepower to crack a planet. Its hull was covered with names, just like all the ships, but the Remembrance carried a special list. The names of those who had died at Sol Station on the first day of the purge. Mei Chen stood on the bridge as her fleet surrounded the Drathos capital world. The planet was beautiful in a cold way, covered in silver cities and towering monuments to military glory. Orbital stations circled it like jewels, and a defensive fleet of nearly 100,000 ships stood ready to protect it. Admiral, her tactical officer reported, the enemy fleet is moving to engage. They outnumber us 2-1. Mei Chen nodded. Then it will be an even fight. The Battle of Drathos Prime lasted 6 hours. The Drathos fought with everything they had. They were a warrior species, proud and skilled, and they had never been defeated in their own space. Their ships were powerful, and their tactics were refined by centuries of combat. But humans had spent 300 years preparing for exactly this battle. They knew every Drathos tactic. They had trained against simulated Drathos fleets millions of times, and their technology was superior in every way. The Wrath drives let human ships appear and disappear at will, striking from unexpected angles and retreating before the enemy could respond. Human weapons cut through Drathos shields like they were not there. Human fighters swarmed around enemy capital ships, finding weak points and exploiting them with surgical precision, and the ascended soldiers boarded enemy vessels, tearing through Drathos warriors with terrifying efficiency. Commander Victor Reyes, now nearly 350 years old but still at the peak of his enhanced abilities, led a team that captured the enemy command ship. He stood over the body of the Drathos admiral and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. When the battle ended, The Drathos defensive fleet had been reduced to scattered survivors fleeing for the outer system. The planet lay exposed and helpless. Mei Chen broadcast her message to the surface. People of Drathos. 300 years ago, your leaders decided that humanity was a threat that needed to be eliminated. They murdered 11 billion innocent people. Men, women, and children who had done nothing wrong. They burned our world and thought they had ended us forever. She paused. We could do the same to you now. We have the power to turn your world to glass, just as you did to ours. Many of my people have begged me to do exactly that. They want revenge. They want you to feel the same pain we felt. The bridge was silent. Everyone waited for her decision. But we will not do it. We will not become like you. We will not murder billions of innocents to punish the crimes of their ancestors. That is not who we are. She took a deep breath. Instead, you will face justice. Your military leadership will be tried for crimes against humanity. Your empire will be dismantled. Your species will be stripped of all weapons and confined to a single world, where you will live in peace whether you like it or not. You will never again have the power to harm another species. Her voice hardened. And every year, on the anniversary of Earth's destruction, you will read the names of the 11 billion. Every last name. So that you never forget what your people did. So that your children and your children's children know the truth of your history. She ended the transmission and turned to her officers. Begin landing operations. Take the military leadership alive if possible. Minimize civilian casualties. Yes, Admiral. As her forces descended on the Drathos homeworld, Mei Chen allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. This was not the end. The Drathos were only the first. The other elder species, the ones who had watched humanity burn and done nothing, still needed to face their reckoning. 3 weeks later, the remembrance appeared at the heart of the Galactic Concord. The Concord assembly station had not changed much in 3 centuries. It was still the same massive structure, shaped like a flower with 1,000 petals. It was still filled with representatives from the elder species, playing their eternal games of politics and power. They had been arguing about the Drathos situation when the human fleet arrived. Panic spread through the station as sensors detected 40,000 warships surrounding them. Emergency protocols activated. Defensive systems powered up. Urgent messages were sent to every species begging for military support. None came. The elder species had spent millennia competing with each other. They had no real unity, no true alliance. When faced with an existential threat, each one looked out for itself. Admiral Chen's image appeared on every screen in the assembly chamber. 300 years ago, an ambassador from Earth stood where I now appear, she said. Her name was Elena Vasquez. She asked for your help as her people were being slaughtered. She begged for justice. She warned you that you were making a terrible mistake. Mei Chen's face was hard as stone. You laughed at her. You dismissed the murder of 11 billion people as a necessary population correction. You went back to your petty arguments while our world burned. She let the words sink in. Ambassador Vasquez asked you to remember that day. I am here to ensure that you do. The screens filled with images. Earth before the purge, blue and green and beautiful. Earth during the purge, burning, dying, screaming. Earth after the purge, a lifeless rock, empty and silent. We have already dealt with the Drathos, Mei Chen continued. Their empire is no more. Their military is destroyed. Their leaders are in custody, awaiting trial. But they were not alone in their crime. Every species in this assembly shares responsibility. You could have stopped them. You could have helped us. Instead, you did nothing. A Calorian representative stood up. It was the descendant of Ambassador Verath, the one who had dismissed humanity as Class 7 so long ago. This is outrageous, he shouted. We had nothing to do with the Drathos attack. We cannot be held responsible for. You voted against us, Mei Chen interrupted. Every time we asked for help, you voted against us. When the Vrethkai stole our colonies, you ruled in their favor. When we asked for technology to save our dying people, you refused. You treated us as less than nothing, as animals not worth protecting. She leaned forward. That was your choice. Now you face the consequences. The Battle of Nexus Prime began moments later. The Concord had assembled a combined fleet of over 2 million warships, the largest military force in galactic history. Every species had contributed something, hoping that sheer numbers would overwhelm the human invaders. They were wrong. Human ships danced through the enemy formation. their wrath drives letting them strike and retreat faster than the Concord forces could react. Human weapons cut through shields that had withstood centuries of warfare. Human tactics exploited weaknesses that the elder species did not even know they had. Within 6 hours, the Concord fleet was broken. Millions of alien soldiers were dead or captured. The surviving ships fled in every direction, abandoning the assembly to its fate. Mei Chen watched the rout from her bridge. She felt no joy, only a cold, grim satisfaction. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender signals from the assembly station. They're asking for terms." Mei Chen nodded. "Tell them I will address the assembly personally. All representatives will attend, or their species will be considered hostile." An hour later, she walked into the assembly chamber. She wore the same uniform she had worn throughout the campaign, still marked with the dust and smoke of battle. Behind her walked 50 ascended soldiers, their enhanced bodies moving with inhuman grace. The chamber was full. Every species was represented, even those who had fled the battle. They looked at her with fear and hatred and, in some cases, grudging respect. Mei Chen stood at the central podium, the same place where Elena Vasquez had made her final speech so many centuries ago. "The Galactic Concord is dissolved," she announced. "Your empires, your alliances, your treaties, they mean nothing now. Humanity has returned, and we have brought judgment with us." She looked around at the gathered aliens. "You had 100,000 years to build a civilization worth respecting. Instead, you created a galaxy where the strong prey on the weak and no one cares about justice. You looked at us, a young species, eager to learn and grow, and you saw nothing but potential competition to be eliminated." Her voice rose. "You made a terrible mistake. You took a species that wanted nothing but peace and taught us that the galaxy only respects power. You took a species with nothing to offer and gave us a purpose. You created your own destroyers, and now you must live with the consequences." She placed her hand on a small stone embedded in the podium. It was a fragment of Earth, carried through 3 centuries of exile and war. "This is what remains of our homeworld. 11 billion people lived there. They had families and dreams and hopes for the future. And you let them die." Mei Chen looked at each species in turn. "We will never forget. The galaxy will never forget. And from this day forward, everything will be different." She stepped back from the podium. "A new order begins today. Not the Concord. Not an empire of humans ruling over other species. Something better. Something just. A galaxy where no species, no matter how young or weak, will ever be ignored again." The chamber was silent. "You taught us a lesson 300 years ago," Mei Chen said. "Now we will teach you. The lesson is simple. Humanity asked once for kindness. We will not ask again." She turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving the elder species to contemplate the end of everything they had known. Behind her, on every screen in the station, the names began to scroll once more. 11 billion names. 11 billion reminders of why humanity had returned, and why the galaxy would never be the same. The galaxy held its breath. 2 years had passed since humanity's return, and the elder species still could not quite believe what had happened. For 100,000 years, they had ruled the stars without challenge. They had thought themselves the masters of all creation, eternal and invincible. Now they waited in fear, wondering what the humans would do next. The answer came not with weapons, but with law. Admiral Mei Chen established the Terran Covenant on the first anniversary of the Battle of Nexus Prime. It was not an empire in the traditional sense. Humanity did not want to rule over other species the way the Conquered had. They wanted something different, something better. "We could crush you all," Mei Chen told the gathered representatives of every species in the galaxy. They had been summoned to the ruins of the old Concord Assembly, which was being rebuilt into something new. "We have the power. We have the right, given what you did to us. But that is not who we are." She stood before them in simple clothes, without weapons or guards. The message was clear. She did not fear them. She did not need to. The Terran Covenant will be built on one principle: justice. Every species will be protected. Every species will have a voice. No one will ever be ignored again. A Calorian representative raised his hand. "And if we refuse to join?" Mei Chen looked at him calmly. "You are free to refuse. We will not force you. But understand this. The days when the strong could prey on the weak without consequence are over. If your species attacks another, If you commit atrocities or try to exterminate those weaker than you, humanity will respond. And you have seen what that means. The Kilorian lowered his hand. The trials began 3 months later. General Kethvor the Younger was the first to face judgment. He had been captured during the fall of Drathos Prime, dragged from his bunker by ascended soldiers who handled him like he was made of glass. They could have killed him with a single blow, but they had orders to take him alive. The trial was held in the Memorial of Names on Haven, the same chamber where 11 billion names covered the walls from floor to ceiling. Every human in the galaxy watched through live broadcasts. So did much of the alien population. Kethvor stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by the names of his victims. He was old now, nearly 200 years old by Drathos standards, but he still held himself with the pride of a warrior. The presiding judge was a human woman named Sarah Chen the Younger, a distant descendant of the original Sarah Chen, named in her honor. She read the charges in a clear, steady voice. General Kethvor, you are charged with crimes against humanity, specifically ordering the continuation of the purge after the initial attack on Earth, commanding forces that destroyed the Mars colonies, resulting in 800 million deaths, commanding forces that destroyed the Venus stations, resulting in 200 million deaths, and commanding forces that destroyed the lunar settlements, resulting in 1.2 billion deaths. She looked up from her papers. How do you plead? Kethvor raised his head. I plead guilty. I did these things. I would do them again if given the chance. Your species was a threat that needed to be eliminated. The chamber was silent. Many humans had expected him to deny his crimes, to make excuses, to beg for mercy. They had not expected honesty. Why? Sarah Chen asked. Why did you believe we were a threat? We had no weapons that could harm you, no technology that challenged yours. We asked only for friendship. Kethvor laughed bitterly. That is exactly why you were a threat. Your species learned too quickly. You adapted too well. In 1,000 years, maybe 2, you would have caught up to us. In 10,000 years, you might have surpassed us. We saw what you could become, and we decided to stop it before it happened. He looked around at the walls of names. I see now that we failed. You survived. You grew strong, and you became exactly what we feared. He turned back to Sarah Chen. So yes, I am guilty, but I do not apologize. I was protecting my people from a future threat. That is a general's duty. Sarah Chen considered his words for a long moment. You are correct about one thing, she finally said. We have become exactly what you feared, but not because of anything inherent in our nature. We were changed by what you did to us. You took a species that wanted peace and turned them into warriors. You took a species that wanted friendship and taught them hatred. Whatever we have become, you created it. She stood up. The sentence of this tribunal is as follows. General Kethvor, you will spend the remainder of your life in the Memorial of Names. You will not be harmed. You will be fed and housed and cared for. But every day, from now until you die, you will walk among these names. You will read them. You will learn them. You will understand the weight of what you did. Kethvor's face showed the first hint of emotion, surprise, perhaps even fear. When you die, Sarah Chen continued, your body will be cremated and your ashes scattered in space. There will be no memorial for you, no monument. No one will remember your name. That is the punishment for those who tried to erase an entire species from existence. They themselves will be erased from history. The general was led away. He would live for another 60 years in the memorial, walking among the names of his victims, slowly going mad from the weight of their silent accusation. Over the next decade, more trials followed. Every military leader who had participated in the purge faced judgment. Every politician who had voted against protecting humanity faced questioning. Every species that had stood by and done nothing was forced to acknowledge their failure. The punishments varied. Some were imprisoned. Some were exiled. Some were simply required to teach their children the truth about what had happened. Humanity was careful not to become tyrants themselves. They did not seek revenge for its own sake. They sought justice cold, methodical, and thorough. The Drathos, as a species, were not destroyed. Mei Chen had kept her promise about that. But they were transformed. Their empire was dismantled. Their military was eliminated. Their population was confined to a single nature preserve world, where they would live without advanced technology for the next 10,000 years. This is not cruelty, Mei Chen explained in her final address to the Drathos people. This is protection for you and for everyone else. You have proven that your species cannot be trusted with power. Perhaps in 10,000 years, you will have learned differently. Until then, you will live simply and peacefully, and you will remember why. The Vrethkai, who had stolen human colonies before the Purge, faced a different punishment. They were required to pay reparations to humanity for 10,000 years, not in money or resources, but in service. Vrethkai workers helped rebuild human settlements. Vrethkai scientists shared their knowledge freely. Vrethkai leaders publicly acknowledged their crimes in ceremonies broadcast across the galaxy. It was humiliating for them. It was meant to be. The other elder species faced lighter consequences, depending on their level of involvement. But all of them were required to include the story of the Purge in their educational systems. All of them were required to observe a day of remembrance every year. All of them were required to send representatives to the Memorial of Names to bear witness to what had been done. History must be remembered, Mei Chen said. If it is forgotten, it will repeat itself. We will not allow that to happen. As the years passed, something unexpected began to happen. The galaxy started to change not just because of fear, but because of something deeper. Younger members of the elder species began to question the attitudes of their ancestors. They looked at the evidence of the Purge and felt shame. They read the names in the memorial and wept for people they had never known. They asked themselves, how could this have happened? How could we have allowed this? Some of them reached out to humans, seeking friendship and understanding. They were met with caution at first. 3 centuries of hatred could not be erased overnight. But slowly, carefully, connections began to form. A Kilorian scientist named Verath the Younger, descended from the same ambassador Verath, who had dismissed humanity so long ago, dedicated his life to studying human history and culture. He wrote a massive work called The Forgotten People, which documented everything that had been lost in the Purge. It became required reading throughout the galaxy. My ancestor was a fool, Verath wrote in the introduction. He looked at humans and saw nothing of value. He did not understand that every species has value. Every life has meaning. I have spent my career trying to correct his mistake. I can never fully succeed, but I will never stop trying. A Vrethkai artist created a sculpture that stood 100 meters tall, depicting a human mother holding a child, looking up at a sky full of fire. It was placed in the center of the former Concord Assembly, now renamed the Hall of Memory. Millions of visitors came every year to stand before it and reflect. Even some Drathos, living in their primitive exile, began to change. The children born after the defeat did not share their parents' pride. They learned the truth about the Purge and felt only horror. Some of them petitioned to be allowed to visit the memorial, to add their voices to those asking for forgiveness. Humanity watched these changes with mixed emotions. Some humans welcomed the signs of redemption. Others could not forget what had been done and refused to believe in genuine change. The debate about how to move forward continued for generations. Mei Chen lived long enough to see the beginning of this transformation. The Tanaka Protocol kept her alive for 430 years, and she remained active until nearly the end. But eventually, even she grew tired. On the 300th anniversary of the Purge, she gave her final public address. She was old now, truly old, her body finally failing despite all the advanced medicine that humanity had developed. But her mind was still sharp, and her voice still carried the weight of history. 300 years ago, my ancestors fled into the darkness with nothing but their memories and their hatred, she said. They dreamed of this day, the day when humanity would stand victorious, when those who wronged us would face justice. They passed that dream down through the generations, and we made it real. She paused, looking out at the assembled crowd. Humans and aliens alike had gathered to hear her speak. Some of them were old enemies, some were new friends. All of them listened in silence. But I want to tell you something that I have learned in my long life. Revenge is not enough. Justice is not enough. These things were necessary. We could not move forward without them. But they cannot be our only purpose. She gestured to the stars visible through the great windows of the Hall of Memory. The galaxy is vast. There is so much to explore, so much to learn, so much to build. Humanity spent 3 centuries preparing for war. Now we must learn how to prepare for peace. Her voice grew softer. I will not be here to see what comes next. That is for younger generations to decide. But I want to leave you with one thought. We were right to seek justice. We were right to hold our enemies accountable. But now we must ask ourselves, what do we want to become? She looked directly into the cameras that were broadcasting her words across the galaxy. Do we want to be defined by what was done to us? Or do we want to be defined by what we do next? We have proven that humanity can survive anything. We have proven that we can defeat any enemy. Now let us prove that we can build something worthy of our ancestors' sacrifice. She touched the fragment of earth that still hung around her neck, the same stone that Sarah Chen had worn 3 centuries ago, passed down through the generations. For the 11 billion, she said. For everyone we lost. Let us build a galaxy that would make them proud. Mei Chen died peacefully in her sleep 3 months later. Her funeral was attended by representatives of every species in the galaxy. Even a small delegation of Drathos was allowed to come, to pay their respects to the enemy they had created. Her body was cremated, and her ashes were scattered on a small blue world at the edge of human space. The world was called New Earth, and it was humanity's new home, not as beautiful as the original, perhaps, but full of life and hope. A statue was built in her honor, showing her standing tall with her hand raised in the sign of the unbroken spirit. At its base was a single inscription. She remembered. She returned. She rebuilt. The galaxy continued to change. New species were discovered and welcomed into the Covenant. Old species slowly healed from the wounds of the past. Wars still happened sometimes, because conflict is part of life, but they never reached the scale of the old Concord days. The memory of what had happened to humanity was too fresh, the consequences too clear. And every year, on the anniversary of Earth's destruction, beings from across the galaxy gathered to read the names. 11 billion names, spoken aloud by millions of voices. It took 24 hours to complete, and no one was allowed to leave until it was done. We remember, they said together at the end. We will always remember. Some survivors of the original purge were still alive, kept going by the Tanaka Protocol and their own stubborn will. They were treated as living monuments, invited to speak at ceremonies and share their memories with younger generations. Their stories were recorded and preserved for all time. One of them, a woman named Maria Santos, who had been a child when Earth burned, was asked what she thought of the new galaxy. It's not perfect, she said. Nothing ever is. There are still people who hate us, and people we hate. There are still problems that need solving. But it's better than it was. Much better. She looked up at the sky, where stars twinkled peacefully. I remember what it was like before. I remember being ignored, dismissed, treated like nothing. I remember watching my world die and thinking that no one in the universe cared. And now look at us. We matter. Our voices are heard. Our lives have value. She smiled, and there was both sadness and hope in her expression. My grandmother used to say that the universe only respects power. Maybe that was true once, but I think we've changed that. Power is not enough anymore. Now you also need justice. Now you also need to remember that every species deserves a chance. She touched the pendant around her neck, a small piece of glass made from Earth's sand, one of millions that had been created and distributed to survivors of the purge. We never forgot what we lost. We never forgave those who took it from us. But we also never lost sight of who we wanted to be. That's what makes us human, I think. We can hold on to our pain and still reach for something better. She looked at the young human standing before her, recording her words for future generations. Tell them this. We were once ignored and powerless. We asked for kindness and received cruelty. We asked for justice and received laughter. So we went into the darkness and made ourselves strong. We returned with wrath that shook the galaxy. But we did not let that wrath consume us. Her voice grew firm. Tell them that we remembered our dead, and we honored them with justice. Tell them that we defeated our enemies, and we showed them mercy they did not deserve. Tell them that we built a new order, and we made it fair for everyone. She straightened her old shoulders and raised her chin. Tell them that humanity asked once for kindness. We did not ask again. But when we had the power to take whatever we wanted, we chose to give kindness instead. That is our greatest victory. That is our legacy. She turned and walked away, leaving the young recorder alone with her words. Above them, the stars continued their eternal dance. But they were different now. They were no longer in different points of light, in an uncaring void. They were part of a galaxy that had learned, through pain and blood and 3 centuries of waiting, that every species matters, that every life has value, that even the forgotten can rise, and that humanity, once ignored and powerless, had become something the universe would never forget.